Hello, everyone. It's Saturday at 10 p.m., and this is Starfleet Tactical. I'm Chris Weave. I'm here with Pat Doyle, as always. Hi, Pat.
Hi, how's everyone doing today?
And I'm also here with Buddy, who Buddy would like you all to know that anything that Buddy says, well, probably Pat and I also, is not the opinion of our employers, past, present, or future. In fact, it's not the opinion of Buddy either. He argues with me about most of these things. So,
well, he'll just disavow anything.
Yeah, he'll disavow anything,
including you.
Yeah.
He's a cat.
You missed it. You missed it, Pat. I was telling Lissa about how he slept on my lap for like an hour and a half while I was watching. I actually was beyond watching E Squared. I was watching Twilight and then Ray Jin, so he slept on my lap for an hour and a half. I left for 25 minutes. When I came back, it's like he hadn't seen me for days. And I'm trying to get ready for the show because I get back and like about 15 minutes beforehand, I'm trying to get this set up and get that set up and get the lighting on and et cetera, et cetera. And he's just there meowing his ass off because I haven't picked him up in 25 minutes. Because that's what
awfully, he's very canine in his neediness.
He can be. He really can be. He really can be. So how was your week? How many times, just out of curiosity, how many times did you go to the ER this week?
I stayed out of the ER this week. So far so good.
So I'm the winner.
You're the winner. Yeah.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Good. Yeah. So yeah. Got to spend a fun night in the ER on Tuesday night. Went in with some heart arrhythmia, AFib, A-flutter stuff, known problem, had a cardiac ablation a few years ago. One of the reasons why I talk about all the medical stuff I have is because the message I'm trying to get across is if you're having a medical condition, you should go see a doctor. And if that means you should go to the ER, you should go to the ER. And so I did go to the ER, and they waited for my heart rate to, it started at about 180. It went down to about 135 on average. Then it went back up to 145, and it pretty much stayed at around 145 for like the next 8 hours after that. So finally, about 12 hours into it, they said, screw it, we're going to electrocute you. So they electrocuted me. And I'd like to tell you what it's like to be electrocuted, but I was asleep when it happened. So they rebooted me and everything was fine. And they wouldn't let me drive home because they had to sedate me for it. So the next morning I got up and I walked back to the hospital to pick up my car because it's only about 2 miles away.
Nice.
And my boss chided me for driving to the hospital. And I said, look, this was a known problem. I knew what was going on. I've had some experience with this. This wasn't an uneducated, whim. I knew I was only going 2 miles, and I knew what the problem was. So no biggie.
Yeah.
And he sounded a little skeptical when he said okay, but he did say okay.
Yeah. Well, he's not wrong. He's not wrong in principle.
He's not wrong in principle. And in all honesty, if I'd been back in Charlottesville, I might have called an ambulance, because in Charlottesville, I know that I didn't actually live in Charlottesville. I lived right outside of Charlottesville in Albemarle County. And I know that in Albemarle County, that ride would have been free. But, there's some places where going, 1.9 miles would have ended up costing me like $4,000 per mile. So
yeah, I do remember once very nearly getting hit by a car, but in my effort to avoid getting hit by the car in the swerve, as I was riding a bicycle downhill, and a guy just wasn't paying any attention to little niggly things like a biker. So my evasive maneuvers resulted in me hitting a stop sign. So I stopped. And then I fell however many feet I fell from there onto the road. And I do remember that I'm just laying there gasping for air because, it kind of knocked the wind out of me a little bit. And some guy runs over, drops his card on my chest and says, I saw everything if you need me to, testify or something. Then he runs off. And I didn't have the breath to thank him.
How old were you at the time?
I was in college, 21, 20,
Okay.
22. And let's see here. But then the ambulance eventually came. And, by that time I'd kind of regained myself, but I declined the offer to be driven in an ambulance, just because, I was a college student. I didn't want to add a full year of college debt to that. And I had no idea what it would cost, but it seemed pretty annoying to go for the ambulance ride. I've done 2 ambulance rides. One for Linda. We thought she was having a heart attack. Turns out, no, she wasn't. And then once for me with the kidney stone in Detroit, in the hotel at like 3 a.m. But it's okay, because I was assured that there wasn't that much gunfire in that particular part of Detroit. And so all was well. So,
Yeah, that much gunfire.
Yeah, that's what the medics told me. So surely they weren't lying. So anyways, that's it. So that's my ambulance story.
Yeah, I've only got one ambulance trip myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when that was in 2016 with my first AFib incident. I took an ambulance to University of Virginia Medical Center, which was the one and only time I went to their ER, because they have horrible cell phone reception and not very good internet.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be in all seriousness, I wanted to be in better connectivity when I'm having an emergency and need to tell people there's an emergency. I want to have better connectivity.
Yeah. And you don't want to be bored for that long, right?
Well, that's hey, that's it too. I mean, I was there I went to the hospital at 9:30ish and didn't get the chance to go home until like 6:15 the next night.
Yeah.
So I mean, I was there for almost 24 hours.
Yep.
Now, I could have gone home about 3:30, but the person who was going to give me a ride didn't tell me that he told me, I'm waiting for such and such to come over. He didn't tell me he needs to come over and do 45 minutes worth of work first.
Mm-hmm.
If I would have known, I would have just found another ride. I had other people who offered me rides. I just went with the guy who offered me the ride first.
Yeah.
It turns out I should have said no. I don't trust you. But in any way, I lived.
Good. Always good.
So, but and it means I'm not going to Hawaii as a result of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, congratulations. You weren't really looking forward to that trip.
I wasn't, but if you're going to get out of a trip, you should get out of it before you do all the work.
Oh, yeah.
And especially since I had to have them issue me tickets early. So, and now between SATO, the government travel agency, and the airline, they're both, the SATO is saying we can't give you a refund until the airline flips the switch on the database and lets us into it. And they're saying we can't flip the switch. We issue tickets. We can't flip the switch. And so I don't know, I know that the first person I talked to at SATO said, okay, try doing this because that'll be easier. If not, come back and we'll do this other thing. The next person I talked to disavowed all knowledge of the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to check a few things and then go back to SATO and say, don't tell me that it can't be done, because I know for a fact it can be.
Yeah.
Find me the person who knows how to do it.
Yeah.
Quit telling me that it can't be done.
Mm-hmm. Nope, they can do. There's a waiver for everything.
Well, it's a form. You got to fill out a form.
Right.
And so the person was telling me about sending me the form, and then I called back the next time and say I need the form, and it's like there's no form for that. There's no way in her. The one and only way that you can get a refund at this point is like. So let me get this straight. The airline that never had my travel card is the only way that they can give me a refund on that travel card. They never had my credit card information.
Yeah. No, I hate dealing with it every time I have to deal with it. So
in the world of Star Trek, I understand why they got rid of money. Do we really think that when Riker goes TDY, he has to deal with this shit?
I've got to believe that in the never-ending forward progress of humanity, as they push the boundaries, there aren't annoying things that are going wrong that should that were working fine the week before.
You know, if you go online, you can find the Apollo 11 astronauts travel vouchers.
Uh-huh.
I'm not joking. They filled
Oh,
out
really?
travel vouchers for going to the moon.
For going to the moon. That's so. Yeah. Would they get reimbursed for mileage or for time away?
They were using a government vehicle.
Oh, that's too bad.
Just think though, 51 cents a mile going to the moon. And
Yeah,
back.
yeah, I know. They'd be rich.
Yeah. So
they probably didn't get paid nearly that much for taking that risk.
It really is amazing.
Yeah.
The more I learn about Apollo, it's sort of funny because I never really cared about rockets until rockets started becoming reusable and it looked like you could actually do stuff with them, as opposed to every space mission is this handcrafted thing that's a one-off thing that costs $1 billion. I was just listening to something earlier today on my walk to and from the grocery store, because I had a last-minute hankering for a banana, so I walked to the grocery store to get a banana right before the show started. And the calculation is that they think a Starship flight is going to cost like $10 to $18 million.
Mm-hmm.
And per flight for Starship, as opposed to like SLS is going to be, if they get the economies of scale they're hoping for, they can get the price down to about $1 billion per flight.
Yeah, 18 million for that sort of thing is pocket change by comparison. Yeah.
And people keep saying things like, yeah, but SpaceX, if they're going to do Starship, they have to refill it 10 times. They have to do 10 refill missions, and that'll be expensive. It's like, yeah, that'll take it up to like only 1/5 the cost of an SLS launch.
Yeah.
You're right. That makes it a lot more expensive. It's all the way up to 1/5 the cost.
Yeah.
So
that's not an insignificant improvement. So
if you make it cheap enough, if they have to do 100 flights, it makes it sense to do 100 flights. If you can make it cheap.
Well, I mean, think about a 747 flight across the world. That used to be months and months worth of traveling, right? And a whole shit ton of risk.
Well, and I mean, you were telling me earlier that you actually have experience with flying your airplane to a destination and then throwing it away. Most pilots don't have that experience.
No,
I've to the boneyard.
Oh, yes. I have delivered a couple planes to the boneyard out in Arizona. That's true. Okay. I was going to say, I've never damaged an airplane so far. So far, so good. Yeah.
Somebody points out the Starship number doesn't include program costs. SLS does. And that is entirely and completely true. And that's one of the things that I always point out to people is that, if you use the kind of logic that they're using, airlines are free, right? They already bought the airplane.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't include something that I think is self-evident, which is they're going to crash a few, right?
Yeah.
They're not.
A couple are not going to make it.
A couple of them are not going to make it. I think it's more likely they're going to crash boosters and Starships.
Yeah.
But they're going to crash some stuff. And, it's only good for a certain number of flights. So they do have to amortize, right? At some point, they write it off.
Yeah.
And they can probably recycle a bunch of that. One of the advantages of having a stainless steel hull is they can recycle stainless steel.
Mm-hmm.
So get some of that money back, at least. Maybe all of it. Well, not all of it, but I mean, maybe all of the money that they paid for the raw metal. Maybe they can get all of that back.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, the accounting on this stuff is all kind of up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
But the real lesson to take away is reusability changes everything.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Has China shown any propensity or capability for reusing rockets?
They claim that they've got this rocket proposal that, hey, what do you know? It looks just like Starship.
Mm-hmm.
That they claim they're going to do. But the thing is I don't think Elon Musk is going to let them steal the plans for that.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chinese, if the Chinese can actually get access to the raw data, they can make some good systems, right? They can certainly do the electronics they can manufacture stuff reasonably well. That's the real difference between the Chinese and the Russians, is that the Russians couldn't manufacture worth shit. They could actually design their own stuff, but they couldn't manufacture worth shit. The Chinese aren't really good about designing their own things, but they can manufacture.
Yeah.
But
I know with
do particularly well, and if they, they're really good about copying the outside.
Yeah. But I do know that even China has trouble with just doing gas turbines for ships and stuff like that too. The Russians ordered a few because they couldn't manufacture them. They ordered some from the Chinese, and they didn't have the power that they needed to run some of their boats that they're, some of their small frigates and stuff that they're building for the Black Sea Fleet and probably the Caspian Sea Fleet, or squadron, I guess, flotilla.
Let's see. Rob Davidoff says grid fins have shown up on several Long March launches. Grid fins are really old, actually. The Russians have been using grid fins for 40 plus years. They've got air-to-air missiles with grid fins going back to the... this is not my Jeopardy category. Probably the 60s.
Okay.
More than 40 years. And I want to say the Europeans have some grid fin missiles also. They have the advantage that they can be conformal, and they work better at, I forget exactly where it is. They work better in certain speed regimes than a regular fin does.
Okay.
And so the Russians are kind of big on them for air-to-air missiles. There was something else I was going to say about gas turbines. Oh yeah, I mean, one of the problems that the Russians always had back in the day, the Soviets used to have back in the day, is that they had a much different philosophy than we did, than the West in general, and the United States in specific did, about how to build things like that. The Russians said, well, if we go to war, the average lifespan, our calculation is that the average lifespan of an individual airplane is only probably going to be about 10 hours of combat, maybe 15 hours of combat. So if we make the engine good for 20 hours, we're good, right?
And then you don't have to have a governor on it, and it can run at higher thrust settings and all that kind of stuff too.
So they got
just
great
burn it out.
performance out of these things. Our philosophy was the vast majority of its lifespan, even if the war does happen, the vast majority of its lifespan is going to be peacetime. And so the Indians are having situations where they have to do, because they have bought Russian gear for years, for some of their airplanes, it's like, every 100 hours they have to pull the engines out and send them back to Russia for depot level maintenance.
Yeah. And 100 hours is really not a lot of flight time and proficiency. And that's assuming one guy gets to do all that flight time. So, and I think in tactical aviation, if you're doing 30, 40 hours a month, you're flying a lot, because they spend a lot of time planning each flight. Each hour has to be pretty useful. And so, you'll see people with 20-year aviation careers in the military, and they've got 2,000 hours. So whereas now, granted, they're doing interesting, exciting stuff, right? They're doing tactical training, and every hour of that flight time is hopefully worth something. They're not just flying along straight and level like an airliner. As an airline pilot, if you're a line pilot flying 60 to 80, sometimes 90 hours a month, that comes out to really close to 1,000 hours per year. As a working airline pilot, 700 or 800 hours is not uncommon to get in 1 year. So, from a flight time perspective, obviously, like I said, that jet fighter pilot's doing, in theory, more interesting tactical training than the airline pilot who's just flying, up and down hops and stuff like that. But
a lot of the Chinese op tempo stuff across a wide variety of platforms can be, you can pretty much explain it to yourself by looking at it and say, what about this do they not want to have to take in for depot level maintenance? So like my friend Bill Murray at the Naval War College published an article when I was still up there, where actually I think he cut this part out, but he pointed out that the the Chinese naval nuclear reactor technology is based upon an old Russian icebreaker reactor design that they got like back in the 50s or the 60s. It was a reactor design from the 50s. If you look back on our 1950s era reactor designs, like say Nautilus had to get recored every 18 months. That's a major evolution. So you'd look at the Chinese op tempo, which I haven't looked at in like 3 or 4 years now because I don't do that business anymore. But if you look at the Chinese op tempo and you go, looks to me like they're trying to put off recoring their reactor as much as possible, trying not to put miles on. And you see the same thing with sort of Chinese tactical aviation. It sort of looks like they're trying not to have to do depot level maintenance on their engines.
Right. And what that also means is that means their pilots are not flying as much.
Yeah.
Right. That philosophy translates into less flying experience for all your pilots.
And when they do fly, it's very scripted.
Yeah. Yep.
The Russians, so when the Berlin Wall goes down, the Warsaw Pact breaks up, Germany reunites, and the United States Navy acquired a Tarantal class corvette, missile boat, the Hidden Sea, which is currently at Fall River in Battleship Cove in Massachusetts. So it's literally right next to the Battleship Massachusetts. And you can go aboard this Russian, it was a Kodag design, combined diesel and gas. So it had diesel for efficiency when it's sort of puttering around, and then it had gas turbines to sort of put the pedal to the metal. And so the U.S. gets it, and they do this. Tim is saying she's in Boston. She wasn't in Boston unless they moved her. Last time I was up there, the Tarantal was in Fall River. So, unless he's talking about something else. So in any event, the U.S. gets this thing. We do the foreign exploitation, the technical exploit on it. We take it out, run it through its paces. And the original plan was that they were going to, use it as an op-4 boat, right? We can actually have a foreign gas turbine, really fast ship. And then they read the manual. And the manual basically said, yeah, these gas turbines are good for 30 hours. The mean time between failures was 30 hours.
Yeah.
And they had put like 29 hours on it, exploiting it. And they said, let's just give it to a museum.
Yeah.
So, but there's some other stuff up there. There's a PT boat museum that's got 2 different types of PT boats. There's Joseph P. Kennedy is, as Wright points out, is up there as well. There is inside the Battleship Massachusetts, there is basically museum spaces inside the ship. One of the things I love about that ship is you can go all over it. You can climb inside turrets. You can go inside inside the ammo spaces below the turrets. You see where all the ammunition hoists are and stuff like that. You can go all over that ship.
Gotcha.
It's really pretty cool. So I heartily recommend Battleship Cove in Fall River, Massachusetts. It's the only thing about Fall River that you can really recommend.
Oh, really?
Well, there was a pretty decent restaurant. I was there, but Fall River is one of those towns you just sort of go to and you go, you know what? It doesn't really matter what the weather is in other places. Here, it's gray and cloudy all the time because it's sort of the clouds are the psychic emanations coming up from the town, right? One of those towns that never recovered from the Great Depression. So
okay, gotcha.
But it's pretty cool. And I've often said that I like going and looking at stuff like that because I've often said that my fandom superpowers, I can talk about science fiction navies and real world navies at the same time. Battleships are really cool. It's really cool thinking about how that translates into science fiction. I don't think battleships have a whole lot of utility in modern navies, but that doesn't mean that they're not cool, right?
Yes.
So they're cool. So, but we should probably go back to what we were doing last week and finish off all the episodes that we were talking about that are episodes of Star Trek that never happened. Good episodes of Star Trek that never happened.
Yes.
And I watched a couple today. I watched Twilight in E Squared from Enterprise.
Yep.
And E Squared is the one where they meet themselves, they meet their own descendants. And
yeah, just like the DS9 episode, they met their own descendants. So, and that was kind of one of the things I even got a little frustrated for some period. I stopped watching Enterprise a little bit because it was like, okay, this is the shuttle crash episode.
Yeah,
where you have someone crashed with a beautiful woman, and then you have the Reed and Tucker or Trip, they crash a shuttle together. My point is it felt like they were just sort of checking, okay, we need to have the shuttle crash episode. We need to have this, I liked it at the beginning. They were doing some new stuff, but so for a little while I got a little frustrated with it, but
they had some great episodes and they had some less than great episodes.
Sure. To be honest, I really liked the 4th season. To me, that's when they were really, truly hitting their stride. But when I go back and rewatch even season 3, with the Xindi and all that kind of stuff, that was actually really good. When I went back and rewatched it, but at some point I was, I had to accept once I chose to accept the initial thing that you're going to try to destroy Earth, but you're going to send your test that's only going to do a pinprick amount of damage. That would be like Japan launching 3 airplanes to attack Pearl Harbor just to see if they could do it as a proof of concept, and assuming that we're not going to go to battle stations to try to prevent this, so, because what they sent a little probe out. Sure, it zaps 7 million people, cuts a little swath through Northwest Florida, area I used to live in, as though you're doing your weapon test. You're doing your weapon test on your enemy when it's not a fully developed thing yet. So it was a strategically dumb idea as a setup initially. I would like to have seen them thought something different.
Earth didn't know who the Xindi were.
Yeah, exactly. And now they know somebody's got a grudge.
Yeah. So I thought that was
yeah. But once you kind of press the I believe button occasionally on the sketchy premise, the rest of it tends to be pretty, is generally pretty good. So
yeah, I can make the sketchy premise work. I can retcon that. To paraphrase Andy, I can retcon that. But you have to really get into alien psychology that's more alien than just humans with seafood glued on their foreheads.
Right.
I mean, you could justify it as something that, in our culture we have to go and do something like that. It's not honorable to defeat somebody unless you've counted coup on them first, and so you can probably borrow from Native Americans and get something that looks a little bit closer to that than if you're thinking just in terms of Clausewitz, this makes zero sense. No,
we've both worked for the government, right?
Yeah.
So
one of the things that I don't think I've actually said this on this show, but one of the things that I've concluded, as a professional with some experience, when I run into something where some other professionals are saying or doing things that I look at as, not a professional in that sphere, but I look at it and I go, that doesn't make any sense to me. I've learned that the correct question is not, why are these people idiots? The correct question is, what about this do I not understand?
Somewhere there's a piece of it. Now, the reason for that could be stupid, but sometimes it's actually a pretty valid reason. Yeah, I've learned to stop, for the most part, bitching about the thing I don't have a clear understanding of, and just assuming that everybody around me is an idiot. It's true sometimes, but not always.
And, a lot of, just as a government guy, a lot of the things you run into, it's like, well, why, that's a stupid rule. That's a stupid law. That's a stupid regulation. Yeah. Why do they do it that way? And the answer is,
because somebody found the loophole at
Or-
some point, and it requires a stupid rule to close the loophole.
or the other option is, in 95% of the cases, it's exactly the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, this is one of the ones where it's, sometimes you end up paying the price for being 95% right for being 5% really, really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, it's something that, 95% of the time it's the right answer.
The thing that I end up, the phrase I frequently use sometimes is, somebody pooped their pants, now everybody has to wear diapers.
Yeah.
The dumb rule is, here's your diaper, because somebody else made a mistake, did something wrong, or took advantage of a system that would have been good if people didn't, game the system to the extreme. So, but yeah.
That can happen. That can happen.
But let's see here. So let's.
Are you pulling up slides?
Yes, I'm pulling up the slides.
All right. So while you're pulling up slides, and I'll let you start off, I am going to try to go through some of the stuff that I'm seeing in chat and try to respond to a few things just so that I can save time later.
Nope, it got it backwards. All right, there we go. So when we last left off, I think we were getting ready to start talking about the Year of Hell, correct? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was muted. I was nodding.
Yeah, I can't see you anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll give you a thumbs up the next time.
Good.
Yeah. So, we were just about to start talking about Year of Hell.
So this was a really good. Like I said, for a long time, I've not been a huge fan of Voyager, just because I think the writing staff was maybe getting tired and stuff like that. But their 2-part episodes I really enjoy. I mean, those are generally very frequently movie quality, I think. Just really good episodes. And Year of Hell was one of them. This, of course, falls into the category of a thing that didn't happen, but it was good. And going back and rewatching it, and I've watched a couple other Voyager episodes this week as well, and I really enjoyed them. They were good. They had some humor in them, had an interesting show, interesting story and stuff like that. So I may give Voyager another chance and start going through, picking my way through some of theirs. There's certainly, it seems like about every episode they're being attacked by somebody's some group of people whose territory they're flying through. So, and Year of Hell actually starts off in that particular way. Janeway gets called to the bridge. There's an alien ship as they're passing through Krenim territory, which is just this. It's this antiquated little ship that poses zero threat to Voyager. And, the guy on the screen, Janeway's communicating with him. The guy on the screen says, "Hey, leave our territory immediately or be destroyed." And Janeway's like, "Yeah, we don't care. I'm going through your territory. You can't do anything about it. I've got the firepower to deal with you and the defenses to deal with you. So, you can suck it, Mr. Krenim guy. I'm going to go traipsing through your territory." And, in seeing it, Janeway does that quite a bit. I think. I'm curious to go back and watch a few more of them to see if that sort of I don't necessarily want to say bully mentality, but she's at least making the tactical calculation if she needs to pay attention to these people or not, or to respect their territory or not. So if you don't have the firepower to do something to Voyager, she might just, like I said, walk through your house. But anyways, Year of Hell, I thought this was a good movie. The villain in this is, I forgot his name already, but played by Kurtwood Smith, does a great job, as you said, does a good job of playing a genocidal guy who, with the press of a button, wipes out entire societies, and yet somehow you can be sympathetic to him. And so they're going around, and this Krenim ship is trying to restore the greatness that was their Krenim Empire, or whatever polity they called it, and that means erasing things and stuff like that. And so during one of these erasures, a temporal wave or something like that comes by and changes the timeline, and suddenly that Krenim ship is not this insignificant little patrol ship. It's a dangerous, deadly ship to Voyager, and so it has Voyager trying to make it through their territory and getting into lots of encounters and constant attacks, and the ship is just falling apart. And it's just I thought it was a really good episode. And Krenim torpedoes, they have chronoton torpedoes that easily penetrates Voyager's shields. Chakotay can't understand why, and Tuvok answers that the torpedoes are not photonic but chronotonic, so they're out of phase. They're in a state of temporal flux, so they don't even notice Voyager shields. And so anyways, it's definitely a pretty interesting episode. And you can see over here, hang on a sec. You can see over here are the Aft Torpedo Launchers for Voyager. They've got 2 forward and 2 aft. So it appears that each of those torpedo launchers, I think, can launch 3 torpedoes in a volley. That seems to hold true, but as I watch it, I'll pay attention to see how many torpedoes the Voyager can fire off when it needs to. So anyways, like I said, real good episode. In the end, Voyager, in its dilapidated state, makes alliances with a couple other races. They make an attack. They launch an attack against the Krenim ship, who has Chakotay and Paris on board. And Chakotay and Paris, they sabotage and kind of lead a mutiny on that ship while the ship's being attacked. Still not enough firepower, and Kurtwood Smith is going to come out on top, and then Janeway decides to, select ramming speed, because that is a speed setting on any vehicle in a starship. You've got flank speed and then you've got ramming speed. And she rams into it, destroys it. Everybody dies, but that resets the timeline, because this Krenim ship then doesn't exist and isn't around to change things. And apparently that resets the timeline. So it was a pretty good episode. Really good episode, actually. And this is the main Krenim weapon trying to erase Voyager at one particular time from the timeline. So any thoughts on this one, Chris?
So, yeah, I agree that Kurtwood Smith is just phenomenal, and that you can actually look at Anorax and sort of feel like he was a sympathetic character. I've often said that while Jack Nicholson did a great job in A Few Good Men, that it would have been better if it had been Gene Hackman.
Oh, yeah. But Gene Hackman was too busy being in every movie in the early 90s.
Yeah. But if it had been Gene Hackman, half the people coming out of the theater would have thought he was the good guy.
Yeah, because, you're right. I think that's good.
Jack Nicholson was great in that role. I'm not trying to take anything away from Jack Nicholson, but he was great at playing a bad guy.
Yeah, and when he has that look, he's kind of got that shining, whatever the character. He has that look that you're right. that'll raise the hair on the back of your neck, basically.
Yeah. This was the first time I had sat down and sort of like, I'd seen most of Year of Hell, but sort of asynchronously, which is of course ironic considering what the episode's about. And this was the first time I really sort of sat down and just sort of watched it from beginning to end, both pieces of it.
You know, that was a very humorous joke now that you explained it to me. Okay, go on.
And so the thing that I find Star Trek does stuff like this. It's like they spend all this time doing the setup, etc., and then they need an attack fleet, and it's like Janeway just goes out and finds an attack fleet.
Yeah, obviously they didn't quite. Apparently, another 15 minutes would have been needed to set that up better, or 10 minutes even, maybe 5.
It reminds me of the episode from Next Generation with the video game that takes over people's minds, where literally Data shows up, flashes a flashlight at people, they cut away to a commercial, and then they come back and say, Captain's log, while you were at the commercial, we solved the problem.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, come on, guys. Yeah, but I guess at some point it's like, once it starts working, and it feels unsatisfying, even though it's probably the right answer.
Yeah.
Okay, but Buddy apparently has an opinion about Year of Hell. So, but what else was I thinking about that? Oh, there was something else that came to my mind. Oh, the entire the thing with the watch. I don't understand. She said, go ahead and throw this in the replicator. Because it might mean a meal or whatever. It sort of makes me wonder, what exactly on this debris-laden starship, what exactly qualifies for something that you can throw in the replicator because it's such an important resource, and what isn't? If it's just that you can throw matter in the replicator to replenish the banks,
you had a lot of matter laying around.
There's a lot of matter laying around, right? They took hits to the bridge, so if nothing else, there's rocks all over the bridge that they can use, because that's what you get when you get bridge hits. You get rocks.
Yeah, you get rocks.
Fallen beams and this and that and the other stuff. And so there's plenty of stuff that they can replicate. It just sort of struck me as being. At first, I thought, oh, okay, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
So, but well, it was good. It was good. Not the best episode. Wasn't quite as good as I was expecting it to be, but Kurtwood Smith was definitely fantastic in that role.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's sort of interesting, the Chakotay versus Tom Paris play, especially since the actor who plays Chakotay, which I think is Robert Beltran.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what Chakotay was being very sympathetic to the guy. Robert Beltran is on record as having said that he thinks the Prime Directive is shit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he thinks it's imperialist. We know better than they do stuff. That it's all about the colonizers. That the native people aren't smart enough to handle this stuff, so we need to make the decisions for them. And why wouldn't you help these people if you could help them?
Yeah, interesting.
Which is sort of funny because he's kind of the argument is pretty largely an anti-colonialist argument. The argument in favor of the Prime Directive is an anti-colonialist argument, right? There's this tendency you can really badly screw up a culture.
Yeah.
So maybe you should not do that. But I found that funny. That was sort of an interesting subtext when I was watching the show.
Yeah. So the next one is E squared. And basically in this one, as they're going, this is in season 3 with the Xindi as they're running around the Expanse, and they encounter another NX class ship, and it turns out that it's the Enterprise. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff on the hull. It's had lots of modifications and everything.
It had been sent back in time, so it had been sent
Yep.
back to yesterday, basically.
It had been sent back about 100 some years into the past, and so now this Enterprise has been flying around for over 100 years, waiting for Jonathan Archer's modern day Enterprise to show up.
So it had been sent back to the time of yesterday, and it's the Enterprise. That sort of sounds familiar, doesn't it?
It does sound vaguely familiar, yes.
Yeah.
And basically they've got to fight their way through some vortex to help them go about 11.6 light years, and their descendants are basically now the crew of the ship. So that's Trip and T'Pol's son, and over here in the background is Jonathan Archer's great-granddaughter, and it's crewed with members of the descendants of the members of the crew. And so their attempt at stopping the alien probe from hitting Earth fails, and so they're going to try to help Enterprise get to a rendezvous with Degra, and that ends up happening. And this time, when they go through the vortex, they, instead of going 100 years back in time because of their help and because of changes they made from the first time they went through, then they are able to actually go through, travel 11.6 light years, but be in the same timeline in the current timeline without doing any time travel. And they get through, and Trip's son, Lorian, who had kind of covered Enterprise's Jonathan Archer's back, so that Archer could get through the little vortex. In this case, it was yesterday's Enterprise that saved the current Enterprise. So they completely changed it.
Yeah, they completely changed it.
And because Lorian's Enterprise saved Archer's Enterprise, and they didn't go back in time this time, now suddenly their time spent with their descendants turns out it never happened. And yet they still have the memory of having encountered them, which is also a little bit like Children of Time, which we talked about earlier in the presentation last week. So where the Defiant crew encountered the descendants of the Defiant, which had crashed on a planet. So, but I don't know how you come up with 700 plus perfectly new and original episodes at this point. They were doing 15 straight years of Star Trek. It's got to be pretty rough to be coming up with new ideas. So I feel for them. So you're going to recycle a few concepts.
Yeah, and I can throw. I mean, this is a perfectly fine episode.
It is. It was good.
So is Twilight, which is the same story yet again in its own kind of way. And so, and I'm okay with that. I sort of like they're all individually they're good stories. They're well put together. I'm okay with that, even though it's like I've been to this before. I've seen this. I sort of had that same feeling. It's like, yeah, I remember feeling exactly this way when I saw Star Wars Episode 7. Right? This really feels familiar.
Very familiar, yeah.
Yeah, this is the one where they attack the giant planet destroying thing, remember?
Yeah.
Remember that one?
Yeah. And look, we're on a desert planet to start with. What are the odds? So
yeah.
Yeah. But that's a separate.
So for what it's worth, I really like David Andrews, the guy who plays Lorian.
Mm-hmm.
I've always liked him as an actor. I thought the character of Lorian was actually pretty nifty. I like the idea of he's still very logical, but he's he smiles and he occasionally cracks a joke, etc.
Right.
despite the fact that he's a Vulcan. So it
Yep.
would have been nice to have that character around.
Yeah, it was kind of neat. Yeah, it was. I thought it was a pretty fun episode. It was good. And in the battle between Enterprise versus Enterprise, they did something that was kind of interesting. Is they each seemed to have a pretty good plan that they were executing. Lorian knew where a vulnerable spot on Enterprise was to disable all of its hull plating. They weren't firing torpedoes at each other, so they didn't want to destroy each other. I think they were just trying to disable each other. And then but then Archer just started using the transporter and beaming over important components of their ship. So, in my head canon, it's probably before defense fields or, something that prevents you from beaming sections of their enemy ship away or beaming the crew out into space. I think those are the defense fields that you get and that they mentioned in Star Trek too.
But even with that stuff, there's transporters would be a lot bigger deal, offensively than you ever see them used.
I think so, but so my basic belief is that it's a very finicky system that is easily disrupted, and so you can't, and that's what prevents them from, beaming people or beaming away chunks of the ship and all that kind of stuff. I think that stuff is easily disrupted. Assuming you're talking about two equally technologically, roughly equal species and stuff like that.
Could be, but it does give me. I always get the vibe of like they developed phasers to light cigars, and that's what they use them for.
Well, and in Deep Space Nine, we also see, we see ground combat between the Federation and the Klingons, right?
Yeah.
And in that, they have to resort to basically little hopper shuttles and stuff like that because they can't use their transporters anywhere in those areas. Because otherwise, the easiest way to wipe out an enemy army, of course, would be to beam them off the surface of the planet, beam them about 100 feet in the air and let them go. Or some variation of that, right?
Or beam a bomb into the middle of their camp.
Or beam a bomb into all that kind of stuff. So clearly that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, all those things that would involve cheating, it's like electronic warfare, right? You might have a little advantage here and there, but those advantages get canceled out. So why don't you talk about Twilight in our last, we got about 7 minutes left. So why don't you talk about Twilight real quick?
And then we should also probably talk about the last episode of Voyager too, a little bit.
So I do have to get going in about 7 minutes. So.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So Twilight is an episode where Jonathan Archer had been hit by a spatial distortion that had gone through Enterprise. You may remember at that point in the season, they were having problems with these things happening. And there was some sort of parasitic life form that was extra dimensional that embedded itself in his brain. Why it picked his brain to embed itself in when it's extra dimensional, never explained, but the end result is they couldn't remove it. And what ended up happening was they didn't stop the Xindi weapon. The Xindi destroyed Earth. They destroyed all the other colonies. There's now just a small group of about 6,000 humans on this planet with the Enterprise in orbit and trying to hide from the Xindi. Dr. Phlox had gone back to Denobula to sort of try to research this problem after a couple of years of failures in trying to treat Archer. Oh, and the problem with the parasites. I almost forgot the important part here. The problem with the parasites is it affected Archer's short-term memory. So he couldn't convert short-term memories into long-term memories. So anything from the time he had the accident, any memory that was more than about 7 hours old, he lost. And so he was relieved of command, and then they ended up losing the war. Mm-hmm. And so at some point they
kind of a variation on 50 First Dates, right?
Yes, kind of a variation on 50 First Dates. So Phlox develops a treatment that is able to zap it, and one of the things that happens is when he zaps it, the parasite in that part of the brain that he zapped also disappears from all of the previous scans that he did, indicating that it goes back in time, and also indicating that time in this particular case operates differently than in many other instances where we see time travel. So time in the Star Trek universe, if you think time in Doctor Who is inconsistent, time in the Star Trek universe or the Terminator movies, time in Star Trek works however the script writer needs it to work for that particular episode.
Yep.
And so they eventually end up blowing up the ship at the end to create the subspace pulse, because they're being attacked by the Xindi. They don't have time to finish the procedure, but a subspace pulse will do it. They're all going to die anyway, so let's just blow up the ship and cause a subspace pulse to eradicate the parasites, and that will change the past. And it does, and they get to continue to have a show. It changes the past for approximately 1.5 seasons, and then they get canceled anyway. And so it's sort of like Star Trek meets Battlestar Galactica. You've got a ragtag fugitive fleet that in this case loses, except in the end they don't.
Yeah, they're able to change the timeline so that they don't need the ragtag fugitive fleet anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember this. I mean, this was also a good episode. And you know what? I mean, the way they do it, it does let them explore, some completely alternate storylines that you can claim it wasn't our characters. This didn't actually happen, and so you could do some sort of interesting storyline and everything. So,
Timothy says they went to CD Alpha 5. I thought it was Tau Ceti 5.
Interesting.
Huh. If only there was some sort of global information database that you could access using a personal
You could access that. Yeah.
I'll have to look that up.
And I see that Steve Ross mentioned beaming photon torpedoes to Borg ships. Yeah, I know. That was another one of those things. Like, if it was that easy, they probably would have done it a long time ago. But in this particular case, it seems to have worked. But that's this is kind of the problem. A lot of those writers are not tactical thinkers. They're not people who are thinking about, hey, how could I best use this system or weapon or a combination of systems to do damage to people and stuff. And so they come up with what you think would be a really basic idea. And that's the super duper new tactic. I can only assume that in many cases, attempts to beam a photon torpedo may not have worked, right? Because occasionally in Star Trek, they do come up with their technical schemes that seem like, oh yeah, we just reconfigure this and fire a pulse of this type of energy and everything should work just fine. And sometimes it doesn't, despite their best calculations and stuff. So their technology still doesn't work all the time.
Okay, I am looking up what planet that they ended up on. It's CD Alpha 5, all right.
Wow. Huh. If they had hung around long enough. Oh.
Why? This doesn't make any sense. The planets don't look.
Oh, well, it wouldn't because SETI Alpha 6 hadn't blown up yet and the orbit and laid waste to everything. So
okay.
Yeah, so that is SETI Alpha 5.
That's I had totally missed that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah. Yep. That's good catch. Thank you for pointing that out to me, Timothy.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
So that worked well. I do want to say one real quick about the culmination of Voyager. The thing that kills me about the culmination of Voyager is, Janeway goes back in time to sort of help Voyager get home earlier. during that entire scene, Admiral Janeway is the one who's really focused on the micro problem, and Captain Janeway is the one who's really focused on the big picture problem. And in the real world, Pat and I were talking about this earlier, in the real world, that's not how that works. It's usually the senior officers who are thinking about the big picture problem, and it's the more junior officers that are thinking about the more tactical problem.
Yeah. Now, one thing I will say, and it's been a while since I've watched it, but you had a very cynical Admiral Janeway.
Yeah.
And, when she spoke to the younger Janeway, the younger Janeway still holding true to her principles and, Federation and Starfleet regulations and stuff like that. The older Janeway is like, yeah, all the rules, they're just suggestions. And they don't apply to me. I'm an admiral now.
And there were a few places here and there where both of them had this tendency to go, well, even Captain Janeway, well, we can't contaminate the timeline, but I'm going to do this thing based upon information I got from the future.
Yep.
I can use the weapons that I got from the future, but I can't contaminate the timeline by doing the other thing. It's like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah. So yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. This has been fun. We will see you all again next week. Let me stop my screen share there.
Yeah, Rob Davidoff points out Admiral Janeway's a bit of Admiral Ahab about the whole thing, and that's that's totally and completely true. So totally and completely true. So, all right, everybody. I think we're done. Are we done?
We are done. I believe we're done. So we'll see everybody next week and probably the week after that. Hope everybody has a great week. Stay safe. And once again, like, subscribe, please tell your friends, pass it on. And hopefully we can keep this fun group of people growing.
That sounds good. And I don't know what we're going to do next week. Pat and I haven't really had a talk about that. We'll probably have to figure that out at some point, but so I can't give you a preview, but we'll do something. We'll think of something.
Absolutely. Yeah. Possibly there are on the docket are, we'll do another battle episode coming up with, we'll do an Enterprise motion picture Enterprise against a Katinga class cruiser, kind of like that battle we did between the Constitution and the D7. And then the other one is talking about the DS9 episode Tears of the Prophets, which is a really good episode. So should be interesting. But
do you want to pick one at this point?
No, I don't.
Okay.
That'll be just dependent on how much spare time I have to work on everything.
Roger that.
Those are the things on the on-deck circle for me.
All right. That sounds
all right.
Good. All right.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.